One man, no radio, no protection, directing 29-ton jets with nothing but his hands 200 times a day for 9 months straight at $5 a day hazard pay. How does a 19-year-old learn to stand 4 feet from a rolling F/A-18 and make zero mistakes? Let's find out what it really takes to be the most invisible and most essential man on the deadliest deck in the world. 4 seconds, 29 tons, zero barriers between you and it. The pilot, strapped into an FA-18E Super Hornet, sits behind a cockpit system worth $600 million. If everything goes wrong, his Martin Baker Nasus ejection seat fires in 0.3 seconds and pulls him clear of the aircraft before his brain has time to register the decision. He has 6 layers of engineered survival between him and death. The man standing 4 feet from that aircraft's nose gear has none of that. He has a pair of signal wands, a yellow jersey, and a decision window that closes in under half a second. If he makes the wrong call, 29 tons rolls over him before anyone on that deck can say his name. You know the pilot. You have seen the footage, the helmet visor, the catapult launch, the arrested landing, the thumbs up on the flight deck. Some of you have heard about hook runners, the sailors who reset arresting cables while the next jet is already inbound. But there is one man on that deck who holds authority over every single aircraft movement, over the pilot himself. Sitting in a $60 million jet with engines running, he does not use a radio. He does not speak. He gives his orders with his hands in a language that took months to master and allows zero margin for error. He wears a yellow jersey. He is called an aircraft director, and the world has never heard of him. Every single day of flight operations, the aircraft director wakes before He pulls on his yellow jersey in the dark, below deck, while the ship is already pitching through open ocean. He walks up to a flight deck where jet engines are already running at idle, where the air smells like JP5 fuel and salt water, where the wind is gusting at 25 to 30 knots across a surface that offers nothing to hold on to. His workstation is not a desk. It is not a screen. His workstation is the 4-foot gap between his body and the nose gear of whatever aircraft he is currently directing. He works there for 16 to 18 hours. Then he sleeps for 5. Then he does it again, for 9 months without a single day off. During active flight operations aboard a Nimitz class or Gerald R. Ford class carrier, an aircraft director managed between 25 and 35 individual aircraft movements per cycle. Each movement, each taxi, each turn, each inch of repositioning on a 4. 5-acre deck packed with 90 aircraft is directed solely through his hand signals. There is no digital map showing him where every aircraft is. There is no automated collision warning system that alerts him when 2 jets are converging. There is only his eyes, his spatial awareness, and the accumulated muscle memory of thousands of hours of training. Every single movement he directs is a decision that can kill someone if it is wrong by 15 degrees or half a second. There are thousands of photographs of carrier aviation, pilots climbing out of cockpits, visors up, grinning after a successful mission, jets frozen mid-launch against a backdrop of ocean and sky. Flight deck crews caught in moments of coordinated chaos. But there is a photograph that does not exist in any archive. It is the aircraft director alone, after the last aircraft has been chained down for the night, standing on an empty flight deck, pulling off his signal gloves and exhaling. That moment, the private exhale at the end of a 17-hour shift, where nothing went catastrophically wrong, is the truest picture of this job. Nobody has ever taken it. Nobody was watching. On July 29, 1967, aboard USS Forrestal CV-59, operating in the Gulf of Tonkin, a single electrical malfunction triggered an unintentional Zuni rocket ignition on the aft flight deck. The rocket struck an A-4E Skyhawk's fuel tank. Fire reached the 1,000-pound bombs within seconds. The chain of explosions that followed killed 134 sailors and injured 161 more in under 10 minutes. In the first 90 seconds of that fire, when the instinct of every human being on that deck was to run, the aircraft directors ran in the opposite direction. They moved aircraft. They cleared paths. They made decisions that saved the forward section of the ship while the aft deck was collapsing into flame. That is not heroism as an abstract concept. That is a reflex drilled so deep it overrides the survival instinct. That is what a yellow jersey means. If you were standing on that deck right now, 140 decibel engine noise, 590-degree exhaust wash, a 29-ton aircraft 4 feet away, and a fire alarm going off somewhere behind you. How long before your body made the decision for you and moved toward the exit? Think about that honestly. And tell me in the comments, do you think you would recognize the man in the yellow jersey in that chaos? Or does he disappear into it? These men show up every single day without recognition, without headlines, without a camera pointed at them. Hit like and subscribe. That is how their story reaches one more person who should know it exists. But the environment is only the frame. What exactly does this man do inside it? And why does one wrong hand signal make him personally responsible for everything that happens next? A civilian air traffic controller at Chicago O'Hare International Airport managed up to 2,500 aircraft movements every single day. He sits in a Federal Aviation Administration control tower 190 feet above the ground, inside a climate-controlled room equipped with 14 primary radar displays, a full duplex radio communications suite, digital flight strip management systems, and a team of trained controllers working alongside him at all times. If he makes an error, there are redundant systems, backup controllers, and enough physical separation from the aircraft that recovery is almost always possible. The aircraft director on a carrier flight deck has none of that. He stands on the surface itself, 3 to 5 feet from a moving aircraft, with no radar, no radio contact with the pilot, no digital display, no backup system, and no physical separation from the consequences of a mistake. He and the civilian controller both manage aircraft. That is the only thing those two jobs have in common. The aircraft director operates under a hand signal system containing 47 standardized commands, each one mapped to a specific aircraft response. Forward taxi, gradual stop, full stop, turn left, turn right, increase power, reduce power, fold wings, chocks in, launch. Each signal requires a precise combination of body position, wand angle, and movement speed. In a sustained 140 decibel environment, the noise level of an active carrier flight deck during recovery operations, voice communication is physically impossible without specialized equipment. And radio communication between the director and the pilot is not standard procedure during deck movement. The pilot watches the director's hands. That is the instruction. A wrist angle that deviates by 15 degrees from the correct position. A wand held in the stop position for 2 seconds longer than intended. A turn signal executed while the director's body is not square to the aircraft. Any of these can communicate a different command than the one intended, and the pilot will execute what he sees. The F/A 18E/F Super Hornet reaches a maximum gross weight of 66,000 pounds, 29,937 kilograms when fully loaded with fuel and ordnance. During flight deck operations, it taxis at speeds between 5 and 8 knots, at 6 knots and 29,937 kilograms. The kinetic energy concentrated through the nose gear assembly alone exceeds 180,000 joules. There is no emergency brake system on an FA-18 capable of arresting that mass within 4 feet on a wet pitching deck. When the director is standing in the taxi path and something goes wrong, a misread signal, an unexpected deck pitch, a momentary hydraulic hesitation in the nose wheel steering, he has one option available to him: move. He has less than half a second before the geometry of the situation removes that option permanently. On a 5-acre flight deck with the 90 aircraft parked, fueled, armed, and waiting for repositioning. There are locations where the clearance between two adjacent aircraft narrows to less than 18 inches. These are called pinch points. The aircraft director must physically position himself inside or immediately adjacent to these zones in order to maintain unobstructed sight lines to both the taxiing pilot and the surrounding deck crew. He cannot direct from a safe distance. The geometry of the deck does not allow it. A 2019 Government Accountability Office report examining Navy aviation ground safety identified crush injuries, catastrophic compressive trauma to the hands, feet, and lower extremities as among the most systematically underreported injury categories across all carrier aviation ratings. The report identified a consistent pattern. Sailors were not reporting injuries because they feared being medically disqualified from flight deck duty and reassigned away from their units. They were concealing compound fractures to stay on the job. During Western Pacific Fleet operations, USS Theodore Roosevelt, CVN 71, regularly operates in sea state 4 to 5 conditions, with significant wave heights between 1.5 and 2. 5 meters and a flight deck pitch variation of 3 to 5 degrees across a single wave cycle. Under those conditions, an aircraft director executing a tight nose in repositioning sequence must simultaneously track the pilot's sight line, calculate the aircraft's turning radius against available deck space, read the deck's real-time pitch angle through his feet, and maintain footing on a non-skid surface that loses approximately 40% of its friction coefficient when wet. During a Pacific Fleet operational deployment, a yellow shirt directing an F/A-18F through a wet deck repositioning sequence under Beaufort. 4 sea state conditions was struck by the aircraft's nose gear assembly, a dual-wheel unit transferring more than 800 pounds of static load when the deck pitched 3 degrees during the final phase of the turn. The nose gear passed over his right foot and lower leg. Compound fractures to the tibia and fibula. He was 22 years old. He had been on flight deck duty for 14 months. He had executed that same maneuver correctly more than 300 times before. The deck moved at the wrong moment, and that was enough. 47 hand signals, each one non-negotiable, no radio, no radar. 29 tons of aircraft with no effective emergency stop. A deck that pitches 3 degrees without warning, and a pilot who has no other source of instruction except your hands. Ask yourself, honestly, is that a system you could master completely? Not well enough. Not most of the time, completely. Every single time, under every condition, for 16 hours straight. Tell me in the comments whether you think that level of precision is something a person can be trained into, or something they either carry inside them or they don't. So, who actually chooses this job? How old are they really? What does the Navy pay them to do it? And what happens inside their heads after they watch someone die on the deck next to them? The man standing in that 4-foot gap is most likely 19 years old. The average aviation boatswain's mate handler rating, ABH, arrives on a carrier flight deck between 19 and 22 years old. His base monthly pay at E, 3 airmen, is $2,161. Promoted to E4 Petty Officer 3rd Class, that becomes $2,393. For the specific hazard of working the flight deck, the noise, the exhaust, the 29-ton aircraft rolling past his shoulder, the Navy adds flight deck hazardous duty incentive, pay of $150 per month, $5 a day. That is the official monetary value placed on the daily risk of being struck, crushed, burned, or killed on the most dangerous 4.5 acres on the planet. Many of these sailors had never driven on a highway at night before they learned to stand 4 feet from a taxiing F/A-18. Before an ABH touches a live flight deck, he completes initial training at the Naval Air Technical Training Center in Pensacola, Florida, NATTC Pensacola. 8 weeks of classroom instruction, aircraft recognition, the full 47 signal hand system, emergency shutdown procedures, fire response sequencing, rigorous, structured, and completely unlike the real thing. After NATTC, sailors enter fleet replacement training embedded aboard an operational carrier, shadowing certified ABHs through live flight operations before directing aircraft independently. Approximately 23% do not complete this phase. They are not failing written tests. They are failing the moment a 66,000-pound aircraft moves toward them for the first time on a real deck with real consequences. The ones who remain are not the most technically skilled. They are the ones whose bodies do not override their training when the pressure becomes absolute. During active deployment, ABHs work 16 to 18 hours per day. Deployment cycles run 7 to 9 months with no days off when the ship is conducting flight operations. Between shifts, sailors sleep 4 to 6 hours in berthing compartments where aircraft noise transmits directly through the hull. Across a full deployment, a flight deck, ABH accumulates approximately 3,000 hours of direct hazardous duty exposure. An offshore oil platform worker consistently ranked among the most dangerous civilian occupations averages roughly 2,000 annual exposure hours in a fixed environment with dedicated evacuation systems and a helicopter extraction option. The ABH has none of those exits. The ship keeps moving, the aircraft keep landing. A 2021 Naval Health Research Center study found that flight deck crew exhibit rates of acute stress disorder 340% higher than sailors serving in below deck ratings aboard the same ship during the same deployment, same vessel, same mission. The trigger is not chronic proximity to danger. Experienced ABHs adapt to that. The trigger is witnessing a fatal or catastrophically injurious event involving a shipmate in close physical proximity, with no pause in operations afterward. The aircraft are still moving. The deck still needs clearing. The next cycle begins in 11 minutes. He picks up his wands and goes back to work. The Navy responds to critical incidents with Critical Incident Stress Debriefing, CISD, a structured group session conducted within 24 to 72 hours of a traumatic event. Sailors who have been through CISD describe the outcome consistently. It gives them a way to carry the weight, not a way to put it down. The 1,000-yard stare. The dissociative gaze that appears in sailors after witnessing fatal deck trauma does not disappear after a CISD session. It goes somewhere quieter. And the next morning, he puts on the yellow jersey again. Because the mission does not pause for grief. ABH-2. Marcus Webb was 24 when jet blast from an F/A-18F running in military power approximately 20,000 pounds of thrust threw him across the flight deck. 3 fractured ribs, torn cartilage in his right shoulder. 6 weeks later, before his physician formally cleared him, Webb requested reinstatement to flight deck duty. When the flight surgeon asked why, Webb's answer contained no reference to duty, advancement, or patriotism. He said, "My people are still out there and they need one more set of eyes." That sentence is not a slogan. It is a precise description of how the flight deck actually functions and why one fewer trained set of eyes is a specific, measurable increase in risk for every person still standing on it. $5 a day, 3 fractured ribs, back in 6 weeks. Tell me what that combination says to you. Leave your answer in the comments. Money never explained Marcus Webb. So what actually does, and why do thousands of men just like him walk back out onto that deck every single morning? Every film about military service arrives at the same conclusion: patriotism, duty, country. Those words are not wrong. They are just insufficient. They are the answer that sounds correct in a recruitment advertisement. But on the flight deck at 0430 in the South China Sea, with jet engines running and the deck pitching beneath his feet, the aircraft director is not thinking about a flag. He is thinking about the specific human being standing 10 feet to his left. That is the actual answer. It is simpler than patriotism and considerably harder to walk away from. The United States Navy uses the term shipmate in a way that has no civilian equivalent, not colleague, not teammate. In carrier aviation culture, a shipmate is the person whose probability of surviving the next 8 hours is partially determined by whether you are doing your job correctly right now. A 2018 MIT study on high cohesion teams under lethal pressure conditions found that groups with strong interpersonal accountability perform 67% more effectively under life-threatening stress than groups with equivalent technical training but lower cohesion. The flight deck does not build this through workshops. It builds it through standing next to someone when the deck goes wrong and being the reason they walked away. Every aircraft director operates within a paired accountability structure known informally as the swim buddy system. Each yellow shirt is assigned a secondary observer whose sole function is monitoring the director's blind spots throughout the entire shift. The director's attention is locked forward on the aircraft, on the pilot's face, On the deck space ahead, his swim buddy watches everything behind him. If the buddy identifies danger in incoming aircraft, a fuel hose crossing the taxi path, a loose chalk rolling toward the director, he does not report it. He acts immediately, without hesitation. This is not policy. It is a survival reflex both men develop within weeks of working the same deck together. On an average Tuesday, you navigate a commute, sit through meetings, eat lunch, drive home. On an average Tuesday aboard CVN 78, conducting flight operations in the South China Sea. An ABH wakes at 0400, spends 16 hours directing 66,000-pound aircraft in Beaufort 4C state, eats one hot meal if the schedule allows, sleeps 5 hours while the deck above him vibrates, and begins again. This is not written to produce guilt about your Tuesday. It is written to ask a specific question. Where are we drawing the line between acceptable occupational sacrifice and something that requires a harder conversation? And who are we asking to stand on the wrong side of that line? CVN 78 introduced EMALS, the Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, replacing legacy steam catapults, and AAG Advanced Arresting Gear, replacing hydraulic wire systems. Both were designed to reduce mechanical failure rates. During initial operational testing, EMALS recorded 7.5 critical failures per 166 launch cycles, significantly above the contracted threshold of 1 per 166. New technology creates failure modes no existing training protocol anticipated. The aircraft director still stands there, still improvises in real time, still has no precedent to draw from. The equipment changes. His exposure does not. Here's the part that changes everything. These men are not unaware of the statistics. Naval Safety Center data shows flight deck personnel sustain serious injuries at approximately 1 in 8 per deployment year. They know USS Forrestal. They know Marcus Webb. They know what the non-skid surface looks like after a fatal event. And every morning they put on the yellow jersey and walk back out, not because they are not afraid, but because the thing they fear more than injury, more than the statistics, more than the nose gear and the jet blast is being absent when the person next to them needs one more set of eyes. If you knew the odds were 1 in 8, would you still walk out there? Leave your real answer below. 4 seconds, 29 tons, 0 barriers. Now you know who is standing there. 20 years old, $2,393 a month. Weeks without real sleep. He knows the statistics better than you do. And he is out there right now, wands in hand, watching the pilot's eyes, keeping everyone on that deck alive. These men show up every day without recognition. Hit like and subscribe because these stories only travel as far as we carry them.